The Galactic Council had ruled over the known universe for centuries, believing themselves to be the ultimate authority in all matters of war, diplomacy, and progress. They saw humanity as a reckless, insignificant species, loud, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. That illusion shattered the moment the human warship appeared. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, a colossus of blackened metal, armed with weaponry that defied all known physics, hovering silently at the edge of Council-controlled space. It didn't send a diplomatic envoy. It didn't broadcast a demand. It simply existed, a silent statement that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Admiral Tereth of the Zalven Dominion felt a deep, primal unease settle into his bones as he observed the warship on the holoscreen. It dwarfed even the largest Council dreadnoughts, its angular, brutalist design exuding a singular message. "We are not here to negotiate." Tareth turned to Jirak, the Council's chief of security, his voice barely above a whisper. "How in the stars did they build that thing?" Jirak, his reptilian features tight with unease, shook his head. "Our intelligence found no evidence of such a project. We believed humans lacked the resources, the infrastructure, the knowledge." "Then we were fools." Tereth's mandibles clicked in agitation. "If they hid something like this, what else are they hiding?" Before Jirak could respond, a deep, commanding voice cut through the Council chamber. It came from the warship, broadcasting directly into their secure communications array. "To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the voice said, calm yet edged with unmistakable steel. "For years, you have dictated the terms of our existence. You have dismissed us, disregarded us, and believed we would remain beneath you. That ends today." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for diplomacy. But those who understood humanity best, the few who had studied their history, simply sat in horrified silence. Because this was not a declaration of war. This was a statement of intent. And humans never made threats unless they were fully prepared to see them through. A heavy silence settled over the Galactic Council chamber. The words of the human commander still echoed in the minds of every representative. The warship, a blackened behemoth that dwarfed their most advanced dreadnoughts, hung at the edge of their space like an omen. Admiral Tareth turned toward the Supreme Speaker of the Council, a towering, four-eyed Vortali named Iskar. "We must act now," Tareth hissed. "If we let this thing remain unchecked, humanity will believe they are our equals." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. But Iskar did not respond immediately. His long, clawed fingers tapped the armrest of his throne-like seat. His violet eyes locked onto the holoscreen displaying the human warship. "No species could have built such a vessel in secret," he said at last. "Not without outside help." His gaze swept the room. "Who among us has betrayed the Council?" The chamber erupted in accusations. The reptilian Karath blamed the insectoid Vexar. The amphibious Drell suspected the cunning Varkari traders. No one wanted to admit the unthinkable, that humans had done this alone. Then, the human voice returned. "I would advise against pointing fingers," the commander said, his tone as sharp as a blade. "We did not need help. We did not need permission. And we certainly do not need your approval." The chamber fell silent again. Tareth's mandibles clicked in frustration. "You expect us to believe that your primitive species built that warship without assistance?" The human chuckled. "You call us primitive, Admiral. Yet here we are, speaking on our own terms, dictating our own future. Meanwhile, your fleets, your weapons, your so-called superiority tremble in the shadow of something you cannot understand." A few council members shifted uneasily. "Then what is it you want?" Iskar demanded. His voice was calm, but his claws gripped the armrests tightly. There was a pause. A long, deliberate silence. Then the human replied, "Consider this an introduction." And with that, the warship moved. Without a sound, without a single energy signature, it activated its engines and vanished from the scanners. One moment, it was there, a nightmare made of steel and fury. The next, nothing remained. Gasps of disbelief filled the chamber. "They cloaked an entire warship," Jirak muttered, his scaled hands trembling. "That's impossible." "No," Iskar said, his voice grim. "It's worse than impossible." His violet eyes gleamed with something the Council had never felt before when thinking of humanity. Dread. Because if the humans had built this ship without the Council knowing, if they had learned to cloak such a massive war machine, then the Galactic Council had already lost control. And they had no idea how many more were out there. The shock of the human warship's disappearance sent ripples of panic through the Galactic Council. Entire civilizations had fought wars over less. Cloaking technology was rare, but cloaking something that size, a ship of such unimaginable power, was supposed to be impossible. The fact that humans had done it without the Council's knowledge meant one thing. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of. Admiral Tareth paced in tight circles, his clawed feet clicking against the polished floor of the Council chamber. "We cannot allow this to stand," he snarled. "This warship, this abomination, is a direct challenge to our authority. Humanity must be reminded of its place." Jirak, still watching the empty holoscreen, spoke carefully. "And what if we are the ones who need reminding?" Tareth spun on him, mandibles flaring. "You fear them." Jirak let out a slow, rattling exhale. "I fear what we don't know. That ship isn't just a weapon, Tareth. It's a statement. Humanity is telling us that they no longer consider us their overseers. They built that warship in secret, cloaked it in ways we cannot comprehend, and then, instead of attacking, they left." His slitted eyes narrowed. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you think that means?" Tareth refused to answer. Instead, Supreme Speaker Iskar rose from his seat, the massive Vortali towering over the room. "Enough bickering," he said, his voice like a rolling storm. "The Council has been challenged. The question is, do we respond with diplomacy or force?" The chamber fell into a tense silence. Then a new transmission arrived. The holoscreen flickered, and this time the human commander's image appeared. He was a scarred man with cold, calculating eyes. His uniform bore no insignia, only a single silver emblem shaped like a blade. "Since we seem to have your attention," he said smoothly, "I'd like to clarify a few things." No one spoke. The commander leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "You believe yourselves the rulers of the galaxy, the arbiters of peace and war. You decide which species thrives and which withers under your policies. For years, humanity played along. We followed your rules. We accepted your guidance." His lips curled into a mirthless smile. "But we are not your subjects." The words hung in the air like a blade against the throat of the Council. "We do not seek war," the commander continued, "but we do not fear it. We do not seek to rule, but we will never again be ruled." He leaned back, letting the weight of his words settle. "The ship you saw. It is only one." A cold shudder ran through the chamber. "We built it in silence. We launched it in secrecy, and we are not done." Supreme Speaker Iskar inhaled sharply. "Are you threatening us?" The human gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I am warning you." His voice was calm, yet every syllable dripped with finality. "You believed you could shape the future without us, but now the future belongs to everyone. whether you accept that or not." And with that, the transmission cut out. A long silence followed. No one dared speak. Then, at last, Iskar turned to the council. His violet eyes gleamed with something rarely seen in the halls of galactic power: uncertainty. "Summon the admirals," he said. "Humanity has made its move." Tareth's claws flexed in anticipation. "Then we must prepare for war." "No." Iskar's voice was quiet but firm. "We must prepare for something far worse. Because if the humans were telling the truth, then the galaxy had already lost its grip on power, and no one knew what would happen next. In the days that followed the human transmission, the Galactic Council found itself in unfamiliar territory: uncertainty. For centuries, they had dictated the course of galactic affairs, ensuring no species ever gained too much power. Whenever an empire grew too bold, the Council crushed it with economic sanctions, fleet interventions, or political sabotage. It had always worked. Until now. Because this time, the threat wasn't a rebellious faction. It wasn't a rogue warlord seeking control. It was humanity, a species they had dismissed as reckless, emotional, and insignificant. And humanity had just revealed a super warship that defied every known law of galactic warfare, and then vanished. That, more than anything, terrified them. On the Council's central homeworld, in the war chambers beneath the grand spire of order, a meeting of the highest-ranking military officials was underway. Holograms of the warship's brief appearance flickered in the dimly lit room. Every detail was scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected, yet no answers emerged. "This defies logic," Tareth growled, tapping his clawed fingers against the table. "A ship of this scale should have taken a century to construct. We have entire fleets monitoring their sector. How did we miss it?" Jirak, still composed despite the tension in the room, spoke with unsettling calm. "The better question is, how many more exist?" A weighted silence fell. Iskar, seated at the head of the table, let out a slow exhale. "What do we know about human military strategy?" An intelligence officer, a sleek-furred Varkari, stood and activated a secondary holoscreen. It displayed a timeline of human warfare. Centuries of brutal conflicts, technological leaps, and strategic adaptability. "Humanity has never been the most advanced species," the officer began, "but what they lack in raw technology, they compensate for with ingenuity." A section of the display zoomed in, showcasing battle after battle where humans had fought against superior forces, and won. "They do not fight conventionally," the officer continued. "When outnumbered, they refuse open conflict. When cornered, they become most dangerous. When facing an overwhelming enemy, they innovate beyond expectation." He gestured toward the now-vanished warship. "This vessel is proof of that. It is not merely a warship, it is a statement." Tareth scoffed. "Then we must respond in kind. If humanity seeks to play at war, we will show them the cost of such arrogance." Jirak turned to him. "And if that's exactly what they want?" Tareth bristled, mandibles clicking in frustration. "You think they want war?" Jirak's yellow eyes gleamed. "I think they prepared for it long before we realized it was coming." Meanwhile, light years away, deep within a classified human outpost, the warship's commander stood before a vast tactical display. Around him, officers analyzed streams of data, council fleet formations, intercepted communications, and projected responses. A young officer approached. "Sir, the council is in chaos. Some factions push for war, others hesitate. They're completely off balance." The commander nodded. "Good. Keep it that way." He turned his gaze to a secondary display, one showing dozens of massive blackened vessels sitting in the void, hidden behind layers of cloaking technology. Each one was an improvement over the first, a fleet built in the shadows. The officer hesitated before speaking. "Do you believe they'll listen, sir? Or will they force our hand?" The commander's expression remained unreadable. "They think this is about power, about dominance." His eyes darkened. "They don't understand yet, but they will." He turned away from the display, his voice cold and unwavering. "This isn't a war of conquest, it's a reckoning." And somewhere, in the depths of space, the super warships of humanity waited, hidden, watching, preparing, because the next time they appeared, the galaxy wouldn't be given a warning. Tension in the Galactic Council had reached a breaking point. Every species with a stake in galactic affairs now faced the same question. Was humanity bluffing, or had the balance of power truly shifted? In the war chambers beneath the Spire of Order, the Council's top strategists and admirals continued their desperate analysis. Hours turned into days, yet no new information surfaced. The warship had disappeared, leaving nothing but fear and speculation in its wake. Admiral Tareth, pacing with barely restrained fury, slammed a fist against the war table. "Enough of this waiting. If they will not show themselves, we will force them into the open." Jirak exhaled slowly. "And how do you propose we do that, Admiral?" Tareth's mandibles flared. "We take the fight to them. If they refuse to answer, we burn their colonies, blockade their trade routes, and remind them who controls this galaxy." For a long moment, Supreme Speaker Iskar said nothing. He studied the table, his claws rhythmically tapping the surface. Then, at last, he spoke. "And if we cannot stop them?" Tareth froze. "You believe we can't?" "I believe we don't know what we're up against," Iskar admitted. His violet eyes locked onto Tareth's, unblinking. "Tell me, Admiral, can you say with certainty how many of these ships they have? Can you say with certainty that attacking them will not provoke a disaster we cannot recover from?" Tareth hesitated. For the first time, he did not have an immediate response. Jirak spoke next, his voice carrying an edge of unease. "We have spent centuries ensuring no species rises too high. But this is different. Humanity has been preparing for something we never saw coming." Iskar leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "And tell me, Admiral, what if we have already lost control?" Tareth's claws curled into a fist. "Then we fight." Iskar's expression darkened. "Then we lose." A long silence followed. Then, without warning, alarms blared through the war chamber. The holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a real-time distress signal. "Emergency transmission from the Vexar border outpost," a technician reported. "They are under attack. Unknown vessel detected." Tareth's heart pounded. "Show me." The holoscreen shifted, revealing grainy footage from the outpost's security feeds. In the darkness of space, something loomed over the station. A warship. Not just any warship. A human warship. Bigger, deadlier, even more advanced than the one they had seen before. And this time, it did not issue a warning. It opened fire. Meanwhile, at the edge of Council space, deep within the darkness of an uncharted sector, the fleet of humanity emerged. Hundreds of blackened warships drifted silently, their cloaking systems disengaging one by one. They were sleek, massive, and bristling with weaponry that no Council fleet could match. The commander of the lead vessel stood at the bridge, watching as the first target, the Vexar outpost, fell in flames. A young officer approached, his voice steady. "We have confirmation. The Council is watching." The commander's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good." His eyes flickered toward the tactical display, where Council fleets scrambled to respond. Too slow, too unprepared. They thought we were insignificant, he murmured. They thought we would kneel. He turned, staring out into the void where his true fleet remained hidden, waiting. They never considered what would happen if we decided to stand. And as the first of many council worlds fell into darkness, one thing became certain. The age of human submission was over. The age of reckoning had begun. Panic spread through the Galactic Council like a virus. The footage of the burning Vexar outpost played on every major communication network, sending a clear and unmistakable message. Humanity was done being ignored. In the war chambers beneath the Spire of Order, the Council's highest-ranking officials scrambled to make sense of what had just happened. Tareth slammed his fists against the table. "This is an act of war." His voice was sharp, filled with barely restrained fury. "They are attacking our outposts. We must respond immediately." Jirok's scaled hands clenched at his sides. "With what?" he countered. "Our fleets are scattered, unprepared. We don't even know how many of these ships they have." Iskar stood in silence, watching the holoscreen as the wreckage of the Vexar outpost drifted in the void. The attack had been surgical, brutally efficient. Not a single distress signal had escaped before the humans disabled communications. The only reason the Council knew what had happened was because the humans had allowed them to see it. "They wanted us to watch," Iskar said at last, his voice calm but heavy with realization. Tareth turned toward him, mandibles flaring. "What?" "This was not a strategic move," Iskar continued. "They could have wiped out the station and left no trace. Instead, they let us see, let us witness." His violet eyes narrowed. "This was a demonstration. A demonstration of power, a demonstration of control, and the Council had no response. For the first time in recorded history, the Council found itself outmatched." Jirok inhaled sharply. "We must establish contact. We must talk to them before this escalates beyond our control." Tareth snarled. "And what do you propose? We beg for mercy? Humanity only understands strength. If we hesitate, they will see it as weakness." "Or," Iskar countered, "they will see it as wisdom." Tareth scoffed, but before he could argue further, the chamber's communication system activated. A new transmission had arrived, from the humans. The room fell silent. The holoscreen flickered, and once again, the human commander appeared. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone radiated an undeniable authority. "You have seen what we are capable of," he said. His voice was even, controlled. "Now you have a choice." The council members waited, barely breathing. "Recognize humanity as an equal, and we will coexist," the commander continued. His gaze swept over the chamber, as if daring them to defy him. "Refuse, and this will be only the beginning." The threat was clear. No more warnings, no more subtle messages, only war. Iskar exhaled slowly. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on this moment. For centuries, the Council had ruled the galaxy unchallenged, and now that rule was being shattered. Humanity had risen from the shadows, and they had come to collect. The Supreme Speaker met the human commander's gaze, his voice steady. "What are your terms?" Tareth stiffened in outrage, but Iskar ignored him. This was no longer a question of pride. It was a question of survival. The human commander nodded slightly, as if satisfied. "Then let us talk." And as the Council prepared for what would become the most crucial negotiations in galactic history, one thing was undeniable. The balance of power had shifted forever. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. For centuries, species had argued, negotiated, and maneuvered for dominance within these very halls. Empires had risen and fallen based on the Council's decisions. But never, never had the Council been placed in a position where they were forced to bend. Yet, here they were, facing a human warship commander who had just dictated terms. Supreme Speaker Iskar kept his expression unreadable, but internally, his mind was racing. He had anticipated that humanity would demand sovereignty, perhaps even full autonomy outside of Council control. But something in the human commander's tone, his confidence, suggested that this was not just about freedom. This was about power. Tareth, still bristling with barely restrained fury, stepped forward. "You demand we recognize you as equals," he spat, "and yet you hold a blade to our throats. That is not diplomacy. That is extortion." The human commander gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Perhaps, but for centuries you have done the same to countless others." His eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Tell me, Admiral, when the Varkari sought to expand, what did the Council do?" Tareth stiffened. He knew where this was going. The human continued. "You sanctioned them, forced them into trade dependency, installed puppet governments that ensured they would never rise too high. You call it maintaining balance." He leaned forward slightly. "We call it subjugation." Jirak shifted uncomfortably. "That is how galactic stability has always been maintained." The commander's voice hardened. "And we are changing that." A heavy silence followed. Iskar inhaled slowly. He knew the humans had prepared for this. Every word, every phrase had been carefully chosen. The Council had relied on its control over information, over military resources, over economic leverage. But somehow humanity had slipped through the cracks. And now they stood before the Council, setting the rules. Finally, Iskar spoke. "What do you truly want?" The commander's gaze never wavered. "We want the old order to fall." A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. This wasn't just about sovereignty. This was about dismantling the entire system. Tareth's voice was cold. "You seek to replace us?" The human let the silence stretch before answering. "We seek to end the Council's rule over other species. No more hidden interventions. No more manufactured wars. No more empires collapsing because you decide they must." His tone was measured, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. "We are not here to take your place," he finished. "We are here to make sure no one else ever does." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was beyond what any of them had imagined. Jirak spoke carefully. "You realize this will not be accepted easily?" The human nodded. "Which is why we have ensured there is no alternative." As if on cue, the holoscreens in the chamber flickered, shifting from the commander's face to live footage. Tareth's breath caught in his throat. Council fleets, entire armadas, the pride of the Dominion, the vanguard of the Karath, the defense squadrons of the Vexar, all surrounded. Dozens of human warships had emerged from the void, each one monstrous in size and lethality. They had positioned themselves perfectly, blocking every strategic retreat, neutralizing every escape route. The humans hadn't just made a move, they had already won. A cold wave of realization swept through the chamber. The Council was no longer in control. Iskar exhaled slowly. His violet eyes met the humans once more. "This is no longer a negotiation," he murmured. The human commander inclined his head slightly. "Number it isn't." Tareth clenched his fists, his mandibles clicking with rage. But he knew. There was nothing they could do. The old order had fallen, and humanity had just claimed the future. The chamber was deathly silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on every council member present. For the first time in recorded history, they were no longer the ones making demands. They were the ones being forced to listen. Tareth's claws dug into the war table as he stared at the holoscreen, watching the hundreds of human warships that had surrounded the Council's fleets. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. Jirak, ever composed, exhaled slowly. How? His voice was barely above a whisper. How did you build so many ships? How did you arm them without us noticing? The human commander gave a small, knowing smile. You were too busy watching everyone else. Tareth's mandibles flared. And where, exactly, did you get the resources? You lack the industrial power, the supply chains. You assumed we did, the human interrupted, his tone calm but firm. Because that's how you've always seen us. Less, behind, dependent on your systems. You never considered that we had been preparing for this very moment. A heavy silence followed. Iskar, ever the strategist, steepled his clawed fingers. His voice was measured, but there was an edge of something almost respectful. You played the long game, he said. The human commander inclined his head slightly. We learned from the best. The words stung, because they were true. For centuries, the Council had manipulated species, guiding their developments, limiting their military expansion, ensuring that no empire ever truly gained full independence. Humanity had studied their methods, and turned them against them. Jirak exhaled slowly. And what happens now? The human's expression remained unreadable. Now. His eyes scanned the chamber, letting the weight of his next words settle over the Council like a suffocating mist. Now, you decide whether this ends with words or fire. Tareth hissed. You think you can dictate terms to us? The human's voice hardened. We already have. He gestured to the holoscreen, where the Council's greatest fleets sat paralyzed, surrounded by humanity's warships. Tareth wanted to fight. He wanted to refuse. But deep down he knew the truth. The Council could not win, not today, maybe not ever. Iskar's violet eyes remained locked on the human. And if we comply? The commander gave a slow nod. Then we step into a new era, an era where the Council no longer dictates the fates of others, where no species, not even humanity, has unchecked power. His gaze darkened slightly. But if you refuse? The image on the holoscreen changed. The Council's primary shipyard, the beating heart of their war machine. Dozens of human warships had already positioned themselves around it. One command, one order. And the Council's ability to wage war would cease to exist. The message was clear. This was over. Tareth exhaled sharply and turned away, his fists shaking with rage. Jirak remained still, his reptilian gaze unreadable. And Iskar? He closed his eyes for a long moment. He had ruled for centuries, had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. But now, in this moment, he understood. The Galactic Council's reign was over. At last, he opened his eyes and spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. We accept, and just like that, humanity had won, but they were far from finished, because the future was theirs now, and no one knew what would come next. The Galactic Council did not collapse overnight. It did not fall in a fiery coup or in the ruins of a great war. It did something far worse. It yielded. For the first time in its long and storied history, the Council no longer ruled the galaxy through force or manipulation. The old ways, the hidden wars, the controlled economies, the quiet exterminations of civilizations that grew too powerful, were over. The humans had ended them, not with conquest, not with genocide, but with the undeniable, unrelenting truth of their existence. They had built warships that eclipsed anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had outmaneuvered every intelligence agency, outplanned every military strategist, and outlasted every attempt to keep them small. They had shattered the very foundation of galactic power, and now there was no going back. Months later, in the shadow of the spire of order, Supreme Speaker Iskar stood before the gathered leaders of the galaxy, no longer seated in the throne-like chair of absolute authority, but at an equal table, one where humanity now had a seat. The chamber was filled with tension, but not the same kind as before. This was not the fear of invasion, of annihilation. It was the fear of the unknown. "The Galactic Council," Iskar said, his deep voice carrying through the vast hall, "was founded on the belief that order must be maintained at any cost, that power must be controlled, and that no species should be allowed to grow unchecked." He turned, his violet eyes settling on the human representatives. They sat quietly, their expressions unreadable, but the weight of their presence was undeniable. "And yet," Iskar continued, "we failed to see that in doing so we became tyrants." A murmur ran through the chamber. Not outrage, not denial, just acceptance. The humans had forced them to see the truth. Iskar exhaled slowly. "From this day forward, the Galactic Council will no longer be a force of control. It will no longer dictate the fates of entire civilizations from the shadows." His voice grew stronger. "From this day forward, the Council will exist as equals among equals." Silence. Then, from the human delegation, a slow nod of approval. No words needed to be spoken. The message was clear. The old order was dead. And in its place, something new had begun. Far from the political chambers, beyond the Council's borders, in the cold depths of space, a lone human warship drifted in the void. It was unlike the warships that had come before. Not a vessel of battle, but of exploration. Its hull bore no weapons, only sensors and deep space research equipment. And on its side, etched into the blackened metal, were the words that marked the beginning of this new chapter in galactic history. United Terran Fleet, Dawn of Horizons. Because now, for the first time, humanity wasn't preparing for war. It was preparing for what came next. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The first time they came, it wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a war. It was worse. The alien visitors were far beyond us, thousands of years ahead in technology, intelligence, and power. When their massive ships darkened the skies, we thought it was the beginning of something extraordinary, a new era, a future where humanity would finally join the stars. But they didn't come as equals. They didn't come as conquerors either. No, they came with something worse. Pity. They called themselves our benefactors, speaking in calm, condescending tones about how humanity was still young, still fragile. And so they gifted us with their scraps. Outdated reactors, primitive ship parts, old weaponry, things they had long abandoned. It was their way of keeping us beneath them, ensuring that we never posed a threat. The leaders of Earth accepted, desperate to grasp even the smallest piece of alien technology. They called it a new age of prosperity, a golden age of advancement. But to those who saw beyond the smiles and diplomatic handshakes, it was clear. This was no gift. This was a leash. The world changed, but not the way we had hoped. Factories adapted, scientists studied the wreckage, and governments squabbled over who deserved what. The aliens watched with bemused indifference, believing we would do nothing more than struggle among ourselves. They were wrong, because buried beneath their arrogance, beneath their belief that humanity was nothing more than a race of children playing with discarded toys, they had made a mistake. They had underestimated us. It started in secret. A handful of engineers, soldiers, and visionaries came together, not under the banners of nations, not for profit or power, but for one purpose: to prove that humanity was not a race of beggars, but of builders. Piece by piece, they took the scraps, the so-called useless tech, and they began constructing something new, something no one had seen before. A warship, unlike anything Earth had ever dreamed of. They called it Iron Requiem. And when the aliens finally noticed what we had done, it was too late. The first shot that rewrote history wasn't fired in anger. It was fired in defiance. The day Iron Requiem powered up, the universe changed. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't elegant like the ships of our so-called benefactors. It was rough, patched together with scavenged alien alloys and human ingenuity. A monster of steel and fire. The engine cores burned hotter than anything Earth had ever produced. Its weapons were jury-rigged from discarded energy cannons, and its hull was reinforced with plates torn from old war machines. And yet, despite all its imperfections, it was ours. The people behind it had no illusions. They knew what this meant. The moment the aliens realized what we had done, they would not be amused. This wasn't some petty rebellion. This wasn't about defying authority. This was proof, undeniable proof, that humanity wasn't some helpless child in the cosmic scheme of things. We had taken their trash and built a monster. It started with an anomaly. The alien observers, floating in their pristine, untouchable stations above Earth, detected a surge of energy deep in the asteroid belt. Unfamiliar readings, an unusual power signature. At first, they dismissed it as human incompetence. Maybe an experiment gone wrong, another failed attempt to reverse engineer their gifts. But then, Iron Requiem moved. The first test run was simple. Nothing more than a drift through the debris field, its engines burning against the void. It should have been impossible. Humans weren't supposed to have ships of this scale, let alone one capable of war. Yet there it was, carving a path through space like a steel leviathan, something born not from privilege, but from sheer, brutal determination. The aliens noticed. A single scout ship, small and sleek, was dispatched to investigate. Its pilot approached cautiously, scanning the structure before it. The readings didn't make sense. This ship was nothing like theirs, an amalgamation of crude technology and mismatched components. But deep inside the scout's calculations, behind all the arrogance, was something else. Fear. The humans weren't meant to be capable of this. Not yet, not for centuries. The scout opened a channel. The message came in their usual diplomatic, measured tone. Humans, this is a violation of the technological regulations. You are in possession of unauthorized constructs. Power down your vessel and prepare for inspection. No response. The pilot repeated the command, this time with a sharper edge. Human vessel, acknowledge. You are in breach of... The ship's cannons roared. A single shot. A blazing spear of energy, burning through the void, slamming into the scout's hull. The impact shattered its shields in an instant, sending it spiraling away, alarms screaming in protest. Humanity had just fired its first shot against the so-called benefactors. The universe would never be the same. The moment that first shot landed, the entire game changed. The scout ship, small and fragile in comparison to the beast we had built, spun wildly as sparks and fire erupted from its damaged hull. It had never expected to be attacked, not by humans. We were supposed to obey. We were supposed to grovel and thank them for their scraps. But today, the rules were rewritten. Inside Iron Requiem, the bridge was deathly silent, save for the hum of its massive engines. Every eye was locked onto the external monitors, watching as the alien scout struggled to regain control. Then, the transmission came through again, but this time there was no arrogance, no condescension, only stunned disbelief. Human vessel, cease fire. This is an act of aggression. Surrender immediately. And Captain Grant, the man who had given everything to see this ship come to life, leaned forward. His voice was calm, steady. No. A pause, a long, tense moment where the entire crew held their breath. Then the alien's voice returned, but there was something new in it, something we had never heard from them before. Panic. "You don't understand what you've done. If you resist, there will be consequences. We have protected your species from destruction. Do not throw that away." Grant's expression didn't change. He simply nodded toward the weapons officer. "Fire again." This time it wasn't just a warning shot. The plasma cannons roared to life, sending a volley of energy into the crippled scout. Its shields flickered, overloaded, then died completely. The ship cracked, split apart by fire and force, and in an instant it was gone. Nothing but floating debris in the cold vacuum of space. Silence filled the bridge once more. No cheers, no celebrations. Everyone understood what had just happened. We hadn't just fired the first shot. We had drawn a line in the sand. Somewhere, high above Earth, the alien overlords were watching. The moment that Scout's signal cut out, alarms must have blared in their pristine halls. Officers would be rushing to stations, trying to comprehend the impossible. The humans had built a warship. The humans had defied them, and the humans had won. The question now was simple. What would they do about it? The answer came faster than expected. Within an hour, long-range sensors picked up movement. Dozens of signals closing in fast. Not scouts this time, warships, real ones. The benefactors had decided to respond. They were coming. The fleet arrived faster than expected. Within hours of Iron Requiem's first kill, the alien warships surged into the system, dropping out of FTL in tight, disciplined formations. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to remind us of our place. On the bridge of Iron Requiem, every screen lit up with flashing warnings. Sensors screamed as ship after ship materialized, surrounding our position like a steel net. "They brought a damn armada," muttered Lieutenant Harris, eyes darting across the threat display. Captain Grant didn't flinch. "They think we're going to surrender." His voice was steady, cold. "They're about to learn the truth." The alien command ship broadcast its message, its voice deep and resonant, filled with the weight of absolute authority. "Human vessel, you have committed an act of war. Power down immediately, surrender your technology, and submit to our judgment. Resistance will result in annihilation." A tense silence followed. The crew exchanged glances. The message was clear. They weren't just here to destroy Iron Requiem. They were here to crush humanity's spirit. Grant's lips curled into the faintest smirk. He pressed a button on his console, opening a system-wide transmission. Every human colony, every outpost, every satellite tuned in as his voice echoed across the void. "This is Captain Grant of the warship Iron Requiem. For too long we have been told we are weak, that we are unworthy, that our destiny is to kneel." He exhaled slowly. "Today, we say no." A beat of silence. Then he turned to the weapons officer. "Fire." The ship's railguns ignited, hurling kinetic slugs at near-light speeds. They tore through space like meteors, slamming into the lead alien cruiser with unimaginable force. Shields collapsed instantly. A second later, its hull ruptured, spilling fire and debris into the void. The alien fleet hesitated. Just for a moment. And that was all we needed. Engines roared to full power as Iron Requiem surged forward, guns blazing. We weaved through the chaos, dodging plasma blasts and missile swarms, every shot we fired striking with deadly precision. The aliens had come expecting an easy victory. They thought they'd be putting down a disobedient child. Instead, they found something else. They found humanity at war, and we were just getting started. The battle exploded across the void. Plasma beams slashed through the darkness. Railgun slugs ripped into hulls, and missiles screamed through the battlefield, leaving trails of fire and death. Iron Requiem moved like a beast unleashed, darting through the chaos with surprising speed for something so massive. But the aliens had numbers. Too many. For every ship we crippled, more closed in. They fired in coordinated bursts, trying to box us in, trying to overwhelm us. On the bridge, red warning lights flashed as shields buckled under the relentless assault. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the ship trembled from the impact of an enemy torpedo that had nearly breached the hull. "Shields at 30%!" shouted Harris, gripping the edge of his station. "We can't take this forever," another officer yelled. Grant didn't hesitate. "We don't need forever. We just need 5 more minutes." Because while the alien fleet was focused on Iron Requiem, they didn't realize something else had been set into motion. Down on Earth, inside hidden military bunkers, operators were standing by, waiting for the signal. Dozens of planetary defense cannons, once deemed obsolete under alien protection, had been secretly refitted with the very technology they had tried to suppress. And now, they were locked onto the sky. Grant tapped a control on his chair, sending a single coded pulse to Earth. A confirmation. Then he smirked. "Now." Across the planet's surface, the cannons roared to life. Beams of energy and hypersonic projectiles launched into the heavens, ripping into the enemy fleet from below. The aliens never saw it coming. One of their warships, untouched until now, was the first to go, struck directly in its reactor core. It detonated in a violent chain reaction, taking 2 others with it. The battlefield turned into chaos. The aliens scrambled, their formations breaking apart. They had thought this was a simple suppression mission. They had thought Iron Requiem was the only threat. They had thought wrong. And in that confusion, in that moment of hesitation, we struck back. "Full power to forward railguns," Grant barked. The warship surged ahead, its cannons hammering into the disoriented enemy ships. One after another they fell, crippled, burning, retreating. A species that had once pitied us was now running from us. And for the first time in history, humanity wasn't just surviving. We were winning. The tide of battle had turned. What started as a hopeless standoff had become something no one, especially not our so-called benefactors, had predicted. Humanity was fighting back, and we were winning. The alien fleet, once an impenetrable wall of discipline and firepower, was in disarray. Their ships, designed for calculated, overwhelming force, weren't built for chaos. They weren't used to losing. And that's exactly what was happening. On Iron Requiem's bridge, Captain Grant watched the battle unfold with steely determination. The planetary defense cannons were still firing, picking off enemy ships from below, while his own warship tore through their formations like a wolf among sheep. "Enemy fleet down to 47% strength," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice filled with something approaching disbelief. "They're retreating from high orbit. They're trying to regroup." Grant leaned forward. "We're not letting them." He opened a direct channel to Earth's Defense Command. "Bring the hammer down." Across the surface, the hidden bunkers that had remained dormant for decades came to life once more. But this time, it wasn't just defensive cannons. This time, humanity was sending a message. Dozens of experimental missile silos, long considered useless under alien rule, were activated simultaneously. These weren't ordinary warheads. They had been quietly upgraded with salvaged alien tech, repurposed energy cores, and human ingenuity. And now, they were all locked onto the enemy fleet. In the span of 5 seconds, Earth launched its wrath into the sky. Hundreds of missiles streaked through the void, weaving past wreckage and debris, hunting their targets with terrifying precision. The alien fleet scrambled to react, but it was too late. The first wave struck home, ripping through shield after shield, breaching hulls, detonating inside command centers. Fire and metal bloomed in the vacuum of space, as their once mighty warships were torn apart. On board Iron Requiem, the crew watched in stunned silence as the largest of the alien ships, their command vessel, was struck by 3 missiles in rapid succession. Its shields flickered, then failed entirely. A final warhead slammed into its reactor core. For a split second, there was nothing but eerie stillness. Then, the ship imploded, folding in on itself before a blinding explosion consumed it from the inside out. A shockwave rippled through space, scattering debris in all directions. And just like that, their leadership was gone. The remaining alien ships panicked. Some tried to fight, but their weapons were firing wildly, their formations shattered. Others turned and fled, burning hard to escape Earth's gravity well, their once arrogant presence reduced to a desperate retreat. The bridge of Iron Requiem erupted into cheers, but Grant didn't celebrate. Not yet. His eyes were locked on the retreating ships. They wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. This was only the beginning. The remnants of the alien fleet scattered, their once mighty warships limping away like wounded animals. Where they had once hovered above Earth as untouchable overlords, now they fled, their arrogance shattered, their authority burned away in fire and debris. But Captain Grant wasn't smiling. He sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display as the last of their ships vanished into the void. The battle was won, but the war? That was just beginning. "They'll be back," Lieutenant Harris muttered, as if reading his mind. "And next time they won't underestimate us." Grant exhaled. "No, they won't." Across Earth, the world was still processing what had just happened. Every colony, every station, every hidden outpost had watched Iron Requiem and its crew do the impossible. We hadn't just survived an alien assault. We had defeated them. But there was no time to celebrate. Because now, humanity had a choice. "Sir, incoming message from the Unified Earth Council," the COAM's officer called. "They want a full report and a strategy for what happens next." Grant's jaw tightened. He knew what the politicians would want. A defensive plan. A way to reinforce Earth's position and avoid total retaliation. But that wasn't enough. The aliens had never planned to share the stars with us. They had never seen us as equals. We had been nothing more than an inconvenience, a species to be kept contained, controlled, leashed. Until now. He stood, looking around at his crew, men and women who had risked everything to prove humanity's worth. They were tired, bruised, but their eyes burned with something he hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. No more waiting, no more hiding. It was time to take the fight to them. Grant turned to the comms officer. "Send this message to the council." He took a breath, then spoke the words that would change history. "Earth stands victorious, but victory isn't enough. We have the means, we have the will, and now we have proof that they can bleed. We do not wait for their return. We strike first. Prepare the fleet. Humanity goes to war." The message sent shockwaves through the world. For centuries, humanity had looked to the stars with wonder. We had dreamed of joining some great galactic civilization, of proving ourselves worthy of the cosmos. But the truth was far uglier. The aliens had never seen us as equals. They had come not to uplift us, but to keep us weak, to trap us in the illusion of progress while ensuring we never became a threat. They had ruled us with condescending smiles, enforcing peace by keeping the leash tight around our throats. But now, the leash had been broken, and the masters of the galaxy had no idea what they had unleashed. The Unified Earth Council was in chaos. The battle had been broadcast to every major city, every colony, every hidden outpost that had long suspected the truth. The warship Iron Requiem was no longer just a military asset. It had become a symbol. Half the council wanted to negotiate. They feared retaliation, feared that the full force of the alien empire would crush us before we could even build another warship. But the other half? The other half saw what Grant and his crew had proven. The aliens could be beaten, and if we waited for them to come back, it would be on their terms. "We cannot afford to sit back," Grant's voice rang out in the war room, where Earth's most powerful leaders had gathered. "They'll return, and next time, they won't play games. If we wait, we die. But if we strike first, if we take the fight to them, we have a chance." "Against an interstellar empire?" one of the diplomats scoffed. "That's suicide." Grant didn't blink. "No, it's war, and war is what humanity does best." The room fell silent, because deep down they all knew the truth. From the moment the aliens arrived, we had been living on borrowed time. The only reason they hadn't wiped us out was because they hadn't needed to. But they needed to now. "How?" someone finally asked. "Even if we wanted to fight, how do we go on the offensive? We have one warship." Grant smirked. "We had one warship before the battle. Now we have an entire planet ready to fight." And that was the difference. Humanity had always been at its best with its back against the wall. The moment we realized we had nothing left to lose, we became something the galaxy had never seen before. Something terrifying. Survivors, warriors, predators, and now we had a target. Deep in the outer system, hidden away from prying eyes, a facility came to life. It had been built in secret, a place where human engineers had worked tirelessly to reverse engineer every scrap of alien tech they could get their hands on. Until now, their work had been slow, careful, limited by the fear of discovery. But now they had Iron Requiem. They had wreckage from the battle. They had proof that humanity could do the impossible. And within days, they were building something new, something bigger, something designed for war. 2 weeks after the battle, when the first alien reinforcements arrived, expecting to find a crippled planet and a terrified species, they found something else instead. They found another warship, then another, and another. The first fleet had been built from scraps. The next would be built for vengeance. For the first time in history, Earth wasn't just defending itself. We were coming for them. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The first wave of alien reinforcements entered the system cautiously. Their battle records from the previous encounter told them what they should expect. A single rogue warship, a defiant but ultimately doomed species, a planet still licking its wounds. But what they found was something else entirely. Earth wasn't broken. It wasn't cowering. It was arming itself for war. From the bridge of Iron Requiem, Captain Grant watched as the alien fleet took position just beyond the asteroid belt. Their ships hovered in tight formation, their weapons primed but their movements hesitant. They had learned their lesson. This wasn't going to be a simple suppression mission. A message came through, crisp and cold. "Human forces, you have violated interstellar law. Cease all hostilities and submit. This is your final warning." Grant smirked. Final warning? They were still pretending they had control of the situation. He gestured to his comms officer. "Broadcast on all channels." A second later, his voice carried through the void, reaching not only the alien fleet, but every human listening from Earth, its colonies, and its secret bases across the system. "This is Captain Grant of Iron Requiem. Earth does not recognize your authority. Your rule over us is over. If you want this system, come and take it." The challenge was set. A tense silence followed. Then the aliens fired. Missiles, plasma beams, and kinetic slugs streaked toward Iron Requiem. But this time, she wasn't alone. From behind Earth's moon, 3 newly completed warships emerged, engines flaring. They were smaller than Iron Requiem, less advanced, but they were fast, armed to the teeth and human-built. They cut through the void like wolves descending upon prey. The battle erupted in an instant. The new warships flanked Iron Requiem, unleashing hell upon the alien forces. Their weapons weren't elegant like the enemies. They were brutal, raw, designed with one purpose: to kill. Railgun slugs smashed through shields, missile barrages scattered enemy formations, and experimental energy cannons, born from stolen alien tech, carved through the darkness. The aliens faltered. For centuries, they had controlled humanity with a single lie: that we could never reach their level, that they were beyond us. And now, for the second time, we had proven them wrong. One of their battleships detonated as a human warship drove straight through its weakened hull, guns firing at point-blank range. Another enemy cruiser, damaged and panicked, tried to retreat, only to be hunted down and ripped apart by our own forces. The tide of war had shifted. And this time, it wasn't just one rogue warship standing against them. It was an entire species. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for dominion. In the alien high command, light years away, the news arrived. A war council convened, their long, sleek forms gathered around a massive holographic display. They stared at the images coming in. Humans, once considered primitive, now standing victorious over two of their fleets. One of them finally spoke, their voice slow and filled with disbelief. They weren't supposed to be capable of this. Another, higher-ranked, exhaled. We've made a mistake. A long silence followed. Then, their supreme commander rose from his seat, his expression unreadable. No. His voice was steel. We made them a mistake, and now we will correct it. Across the stars, a full invasion fleet, one large enough to shatter entire civilizations, was mobilized. Humanity had won 2 battles, but now the real war was about to begin. The full invasion fleet arrived 3 weeks later. It did not come with threats. It did not come with warnings. It came with fire. Massive alien dreadnoughts, each the size of cities, emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars. Cruisers, battleships, and fighter swarms filled the void, moving with cold precision. The benefactors had finally abandoned their arrogance. This was no longer a punitive strike. This was extermination. On board Iron Requiem, Captain Grant stared at the incoming fleet. His crew had fought impossible battles before, but this was different. The aliens had brought everything this time. "How many ships?" Grant asked, his voice steady. Harris swallowed hard. "Over 200. Maybe more." The war room was silent. Earth's fleet had grown in the past weeks. They had built more warships, upgraded old defense platforms, and rallied every hidden outpost capable of fighting. But even with all that, they were still outnumbered 10-1. For a moment, the weight of it settled over them. The undeniable reality that humanity, despite its defiance, despite its victories, was still a young race standing against an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia. For the first time, someone whispered what they had all been thinking. "We can't win this." A long silence followed. Then Grant spoke. "Then we won't fight to win." Eyes turned toward him. "We fight to change the game." The moment the alien fleet entered high orbit, Earth's defenses opened fire. From the ground, hundreds of missile silos, railgun batteries, and energy cannons unleashed hell. From the void, human warships surged forward, moving in tight formations, targeting enemy weak points with brutal efficiency. The first wave was devastating. Alien ships exploded in fiery blooms, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire. Battleships collapsed under relentless missile barrages. Entire enemy squadrons were wiped out before they could even return fire. But then, the main fleet retaliated. and the real slaughter began. The dreadnoughts tore through human lines with terrifying force. Their weapons carved massive holes in Earth's defenses, shattering ships in single blasts. Entire battalions of fighters were erased in the blink of an eye. Earth's warships, for all their newfound strength, were still fragile compared to the might of an ancient empire. One by one, they fell. The Valkyrie went first, caught in the crossfire of 3 enemy cruisers. Its reactors detonated, taking an entire section of the battlefield with it. Then the Argos, overwhelmed by enemy fighters, its hull ripped apart before it could even send a distress call. Iron Requiem fought like a demon, weaving through the chaos, its guns firing non-stop. But even the legendary warship couldn't hold forever. "Shields failing!" someone shouted. "Left thrusters down!" Grant's hands tightened into fists. They were running out of time. Then an alert flashed across the holo display. A private signal. One word. "Ready." Grant inhaled. It was time. He opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships disengage. Fall back to Phase 2 positions." Some hesitated. Others questioned, but they obeyed. And the aliens, believing humanity was finally breaking, pushed forward, eager to land the killing blow, right into the trap. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden among the debris, something stirred. For weeks, Earth's engineers had worked in secret, repurposing stolen alien technology. They had salvaged cores, rebuilt reactors, modified human weapons into something more. The project had one goal: to build a weapon not just for defense, but for eradication. And now, it was ready. The moment the alien fleet moved into range, Earth's secret fleet, hidden warships equipped with experimental warp drives, activated their systems. In an instant, a dozen warships appeared behind enemy lines, not human ships, doomsday ships. Each one carried a stolen alien singularity core, modified into a weapon of mass destruction. Each one was aimed directly at the dreadnoughts. And then, without hesitation, they detonated. The universe itself seemed to crack. 12 artificial black holes ripped through the alien fleet. Dreadnoughts, invincible and unstoppable, were crushed in an instant. Their shields, their armor, none of it mattered against the force of a collapsing singularity. Entire enemy squadrons were sucked into oblivion. Battleships were twisted and shredded before they could even process what was happening. The invincible fleet, meant to end humanity, was gone. In seconds, the battlefield turned from a massacre to something else entirely. A victory, not just for Earth, for humanity's place in the stars. In the alien high command, silence reigned. The Supreme Leader watched the disaster unfold, his long fingers clenched into fists. The mighty armada, his people's greatest force, was gone, destroyed by humans. We underestimated them. A pause. Then the Supreme Leader turned, his eyes cold. No, we miscalculated. And now the mistake will be corrected. Across the galaxy, new orders were sent. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The victory was absolute. The alien fleet, once the galaxy's unchallenged enforcers, was shattered, its remains drifting lifelessly in the void. Earth stood bloodied but unbroken, a defiant ember in the dark. But the war was far from over, because now the galaxy was watching. In the days following the battle, Earth's sensors picked up a surge of interstellar activity. Dozens of alien species, once silent under the rule of the so-called benefactors, were now stirring. Some sent encrypted transmissions, their messages wary but intrigued. Others mobilized fleets of their own, either to observe or prepare for what they feared would come next. Because for the first time in history, a species had not only defied the Empire, it had defeated them. On the bridge of Iron Requiem, Captain Grant stared at the holodisplays, watching as intelligence reports flooded in. The Council had gathered in a secure war room back on Earth, and every surviving fleet commander was present. The discussion was heated. "We've won 2 battles, but we can't win a war against an entire empire," one of the senior diplomats argued. "They'll come back in numbers we can't even comprehend." "We don't have a choice," Harris shot back. "If we sit and wait, they'll wipe us out the moment they rebuild." Grant remained silent, listening. The truth was, both sides were right. Earth had just pulled off the impossible. But they were still one planet against a vast empire. They couldn't just defend. They had to change the rules of the war. Finally, Grant spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "We don't need to fight them alone." Eyes turned toward him. "We're not the only ones under their thumb. Every species they've conquered, every world they've strangled under their so-called guidance, they're all watching us right now. And for the first time, they're seeing something new." A pause. Hope. A heavy silence followed. Grant leaned forward. "We don't just fight for Earth anymore. We fight to break their empire entirely. A new war. Not just for survival, for revolution, for dominion. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into action. Hidden resistance movements, once too afraid to rise, sent messages to Earth. Rebellions that had been crushed generations ago stirred once more. Some still hesitated, fearful, uncertain if humanity could truly lead the charge. So Earth sent them a message. A single video, broadcast across every secret channel, showing the remains of the alien fleet, the once invincible warships reduced to scrap, their mighty dreadnoughts torn apart by human hands. And with it, a simple declaration. We are no longer the hunted. We are no longer beneath them. Humanity stands. Join us. On the alien homeworld, the Supreme Leader stood before his War Council, his gaze sweeping over his commanders. Their faces were grim. Even the most arrogant among them could no longer deny the truth. The humans weren't an anomaly. They were a problem, a contagion, a spark that threatened to set the entire empire ablaze. The Supreme Leader exhaled slowly, then spoke with finality. "Then we burn them first." Orders were given. Across the empire, fleets mobilized, factories roared to life, producing warships faster than ever before. New weapons, ones never before seen, were being developed with a singular purpose: the eradication of humanity. Because if they let Earth stand, if they let humans continue to rise, then it wasn't just the Empire that would fall. It was their entire rule over the galaxy, and that was something they could never allow. Back on Earth, as the first fleets of allied species arrived, hesitant, wary, but willing, Grant stood on the bridge of Iron Requiem, staring into the void. The real war was coming, and humanity was ready. The war came faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, the alien empire unleashed its full might, sending armadas the size of moons to crush Earth before its rebellion could spread. The skies above our planet burned with battle, and for a moment, it seemed like the Empire's will would finally bring humanity to its knees. But we had already changed the game. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had become something more: a war of revolution. Humanity was no longer alone. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under the Empire's rule for centuries rose up. Civilizations that had once been cowed into submission now saw what was possible. They saw Earth fight. They saw Iron Requiem carve legends into the void. And they saw something the Empire had spent millennia ensuring no species would ever believe. The gods of the galaxy could bleed. Rebellions exploded across 100 worlds. Supply lines crumbled. Entire fleets defected. The Empire, once an unshakable force, found itself facing the one thing it had always feared: an enemy that didn't just resist, but refused to lose. And in the final battle, as the Empire's homeworld itself burned, it became clear: This wasn't just Earth's war anymore. It was humanity's ascension. When the dust settled, the Empire was gone. Its leaders either dead or in hiding, its fleets scattered, its legacy reduced to whispers in the dark. And standing at the heart of it all, among the wreckage of a fallen dynasty, was Earth. A species that had once been given scraps, a species that had been told it would never amount to anything, a species that had taken its first steps into the stars, not as servants, not as victims, but as conquerors. Humanity had rewritten history, and the galaxy would never forget it.